I'm a warrior, I'm a warrior, I am a warrior, a warrior, a warrior.
Good morning. This is Don Folleterre speaking from Los Angeles on the occasion of the Radical Faerie gathering in Folleterre, eastern France. And I want to make a few comments to you. I hope this video is not long, but I do want to make a couple comments to you. First of all, I'm the co-founder of Radical Faeries with Faerie, who died in 2002. And I want to talk a little bit about how we got into being, what we're all about, and why we're needed now more than ever. I always start these talks out by asking some questions. Gay men, queer men, who are you? Question mark. Are you just a sex act that hetero supremacists have laid on you? Question mark. Why have you kept appearing generation after generation after generation from the beginning of written history up until now, and probably before there was written history? The big question for the Radical Faeries are, what are gay men contributing to the evolution of our species that keeps us reappearing and reappearing generation after generation? The Radical Faeries, the beginnings are in conversations that Faerie and I had during the 70s. Faerie lived adjacent to the San Juan Pueblo in New Mexico. And when he came into Los Angeles, I was the co-founder and executive director of the Gay Community Center, the largest in the world. And Faerie and I would carve out time and visit and talk. And we began to get a little concerned about the direction of gay liberation. About 1975, I began conducting twice a year workshops here in Los Angeles called Gay Voices and Visions, Gay Voices and Visions, where I began to explore the intellectual history of gay people. I began to explore the spiritual lineage of gay people and doing workshops. Walt Whitman, Edward Carpenter, Karl Heinrich Ulrich, Faerie, on and on and on. People who have contributed to the intellectual and spiritual development of gay people, studying what they were writing, and creating what I think was a new type of gay consciousness raising group. Those workshops from 1975 to 1979 created the intellectual basis for the Radical Faeries. Faerie and I began in 1977, a key date, began talking about the need for a gathering of gay men who began to see the world differently than was arising in the gay community at that time. By 1978, we said, okay, it's time for the gathering. Let's find a location for it. We wanted someplace in nature. We wanted someplace where there were no heterosexuals around. Not because I'm demonizing heterosexuals. I don't do that. I have a great respect. I do demonize heterosexual supremacy, but not heterosexuals. And we needed to find a place in nature because that's where fairies loved to hang out. And we wanted someplace that had basic creature comfort. And we looked and we looked and we looked and we couldn't find any place. And one day I was reading The Advocate and I saw there was an ad for an ashram in the Sonoran Desert, east of Tucson. And I called Faerie up and he said, well, let's go visit it. So we went out there in May of 1977, toured the place. At the end of the visit, said, this is where we're going to have it. It's called Sri Ram. It was operated by a Swami Dayanand. His real name was Bill Hayes, a gay man, was running this ashram. And we had the location. Now at that point, Faerie and John Burnside, his lover, were living in New Mexico. So in the beginning of June of 1977, I went out to New Mexico, loaded them up, and moved them to Los Angeles, where the first Radical Faerie sanctuary was located on the Cresta Court. And by mid-June, we began organizing this gathering that was going to happen 10 weeks away. Now, in those days before the internet, pre-internet days, community organizing involved dressing a lot of envelopes, licking a lot of stamps. We had 10 weeks, and we did it. We started mailing out a leaflet. Let me show you the leaflet that we made that announced that we were getting together in the Sonoran Desert to have this gathering. We mailed it everywhere, any place we could find an address where there might be gay people, we mailed it. We thought that maybe at max 50 people would show up. We planned for 30. We thought, well, a reasonable figure would be 30. As it turned out, 200 gay men from all over North America found their way to this isolated spot in the Sonoran Desert. You had to drive down 7 miles of a single lane road that was hardly a road. And there was what was formerly a juvenile delinquent prison camp for juvenile offenders. It had closed and the Swami took it over as an ashram. It had a dining room, it had a kitchen, it had a walk-in refrigerator, it had enough space for us to lay out sleeping bags and put up tents, and in the middle of it was a swimming pool. Out in the middle of nowhere, this beautiful turquoise swimming pool. And 200 gay men showed up. A well-organized gathering. We had no content planned. There was nothing in the way of content. It was the first night of the gathering. We said, there are 200 of you there. We know that in you are a lot of gifts. Bring those gifts out and you create this gathering, which is what happened. Somebody might have had Mary Edelman, for example, had another night at the Baz workshop where about gay male eroticism. Somebody else, the Louisiana Sissies were there, and they were teaching classes in crocheting and how to crochet lace and on and on. Some people were doing workshops on gemstones and you name it. My favorite was the mud ritual, where after lunch on the first day, 25 gay men took buckets of water out into the desert, undressed, naked in the desert, made mud puddles, and chanting every sacred song from every religious tradition in the world, began anointing their bodies from head to foot with mud. And then when they finished that, they formed a tight hug and they ommed for 15 minutes. The most profound and deepest Om I've ever heard in my life. So that's the nature of how that first gathering took place. At the end of the 3 days, as we were leaving the ashram, suddenly out of nowhere, 2 rainbows appeared directly over us, directly over where the gathering had taken place. And from my way of seeing the world, it was a blessing on what we had done there that weekend. Like dandelion seeds blowing in the wind, the winds of fate, these 200 men went back to where they came from and started organizing radical fairy gatherings in cities, towns, rural areas all across North America and Canada. We deliberately wanted it to be decentralized. There was not going to be a fairy pope. There was not going to be a central committee that organized everything. It was up to the fairies to decide what the fairy circles in their area would look like and feel like. And soon they were all over North America, spread to Europe, and then spread throughout the world. So there are fairy circles now in Thailand, in Australia, in Europe, and on and on and on. That was the beginning of the radical fairies. If anybody is interested in this history, I refer you to an article I wrote called The Birth of the Radical Fairies that appears in the Gay and Lesbian Review, September-October 2010, which will give you all the details about that early history of the Radical Fairies. But I want to talk a little bit about why did Harry and I call the radical fairies into being. The primary reason was we were beginning to smell something we didn't like. By the end of the 70s, what was a gay liberation movement was slowly developing into a gay rights movement. Gay liberation means that we take our own lives into our own hands. We don't ask for somebody to free us like we're emancipated slaves. What we do is we liberate ourselves. And that's what gay liberation was about. Self-acceptance. We didn't care whether the rest of the world accepted it. What we did care about, that we accepted ourselves. And we were beginning to feel like it was moving more in the direction of middle class, or maybe upper middle class, respectability, conformity, assimilation. And we thought, well, now as a result of the Stonewall Rebellion in 1969, we have a clearing in the forest, a clearing in the hetero-supremacist forest. And what we do in that clearing becomes very important. Because up until that time, what gay people had was an agenda of individual survival. How do we survive in a society that wants to murder us, that wants to destroy us, that wants to turn us into mental illnesses, into criminal subjects? Up until that time, the emphasis was on individual survival. Now it became larger than that. It became about community. How do we as a people begin to create for ourselves? And out of that Stonewall Rebellion, by the end of the 1970s, there were communities all over the world, particularly Europe and North America. There were institutions. There were gay-centered cultures. There were people feeling good about themselves. Something was alive and working. Harry and I were becoming concerned that what was once a focus of gay liberation with social justice for all people, including gay people, was beginning to devolve into just an interest in gay concerns. And not developing relationships with other social change, even indeed revolutionary movements. And so that motivated us to say there needs to be an opportunity to do something different, to bring something different into this evolving gay community. You know, over the last 40 years, I've observed the radical fairies carefully, up close and from a distance here in Los Angeles. And there are 3 or 4 things, I think, that characterize the radical fairies. I think the first thing is that we're gay-centered. And by gay-centered, I mean we start from what is inside of us. Not what has been laid on us, but what is inside of us. And we bring that out into the open and look at what is it that we're doing in society. If the primary purpose of heterosexuals is the reproductive survival of our species, what is the purpose of gay people? E.O. Wilson, evolutionary biologist, in his book on human nature says, quote, homosexuals may be the rare carriers of the altruistic impulse in the human species. Altruism, idealism. Joan Roughgarden, who has studied, an evolutionary biologist at Stanford University, who has studied this area carefully, says wherever gay people or wherever same-sex couples are found in nature, and there are many, many places, what they're doing has something to do with cooperation. So altruism, cooperation is something we might be bringing in to our culture. I'm not minimizing sex. Sex is enjoyable. Gay sex is enjoyable. So I'm not minimizing that. But for too long, we've had the tail wagging the dog, and we haven't been examining the dog. And so the radical fairies were organized originally to do that exploration. One of the things on the original leaflet was to explore breakthroughs in gay consciousness. That's what we were hoping the radical fairies would do. There's somebody by the name of Bruce Bagamill who has written a book called Biological Exuberance, where he has found in over 300 300 vertebrates, that there are same-sex courtships taking place that involve genital contact. So it's just not we as gay people who are doing this. We have 300 other people, 300 other beings in society, animals, who are doing the same thing. So the question is, if it's so widespread, what is it that these beings are doing? Why has nature created us? If it's just to imitate heterosexuals, there's no need for us. Evolutionary biology doesn't work that way. Something is kept in a species if it is contributing to the survival of that species. And it is my contention that that is exactly what gay people are doing. So one of the things that radical fairies are, they're gay-centered, starting with us. A second thing is we tend to be politically progressive. We're open to people of any political background, but radical fairies tend to want to be changing the society for the better. And race and class are always a part of that discussion for changing the society for the better. So we're politically progressive. A third characteristic is we put a great deal of emphasis on community building. That what a radical fairy gathering is like many times, it's the kind of community we would like to live in, where everybody's equal. They're not hierarchies based on wealth or what you're driving or where you live. That people contribute based on what their skills are. That there is a loving relationship, heart circles we call them at the gathering, where people speak from their heart and people listen through their hearts to what's being said. It's a community in which there's intergenerational cooperation, where ancestors are honored, elders are needed, where adults are required, and where youth is invited, so that they're intergenerational in their operation. So that we find gay-centered, politically progressive, and community building as three important characteristics of the radical fairies. I could go on and on and on. I won't, because I know you have a gathering that you're having. But let me make a suggestion to you. There are young men here in Los Angeles who are coming to me, let's say under 30, and saying, we want to organize a radical fairy gathering, but we don't know how to do it. Somebody out there, maybe a group or individuals, needs to prepare a manual with much detail of how to organize a radical fairy gathering and get that on the internet so that young fairies around the world can have access to that. I would also like to be on your mailing list, whoever, individually or as organizations. My email address is donkilhefner, DONKILHEFNER @SBC Global. S as in sexy, B as in boy, C as in cute, global.net. And make sure I get onto your mailing list. I also have a mailing list that I send out. And so if you want to get on that, send me your name and email address, and I'll add you to my mailing list, where I send out periodically articles that I think will be of interest to you, and it will never ever be monetized, so you don't have to worry about that. And nobody else would use it except me, and maybe the FBI if they break in. Any case, I hope you have a really nice gathering. I pray that Spirit will be with you. This might be the last time I'll have an opportunity in this lifetime to talk to you, but I just want you to know I love you, I care about what you're doing, and peace be with you.
I'm a warrior, I'm a warrior. Glad to be born in a time like this. Fire's getting warm as I rise my fist. Tropical storms as I write my script. Got to perform in a rhyme like this. Walk through the door and my eyes might shift. Got to explore, find my gifts. Share from the core, realize I'm stitched to the dirt, to the stars, to the eyes of a fish. Camera lens for the documentation. Jamming with friends, it is not a vacation. Talk to the plants, hear thoughts of the ancients. Walk to defend all that is sacred. Not gonna bend to the boss of a nation. Lost in a frenzy of want to be famous. Drop the pretending, stop being anxious. Talk to the wind, never lost in the matrix.